Welcome to More Than Miles, the podcast where we use storytelling and expert interviews to widen the lens on what it means to be a happy and healthy endurance athlete. We believe that athletes are so much more than their body, sport, and training miles. I'm Dr. Kate Mihevik-Edwards.
And I'm Dr. Kacy Sinders. We are endurance athletes, physical therapists, and huge coffee addicts. We spend most of our time treating, educating, and working with endurance athletes. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Now let's get to the show. Jarryd Wallace is a highly decorated Paralympic athlete and a close friend of ours. He has had several incredible wins and has had to overcome a lot in his long running career. His most recent accomplishment, spoiler alert, is winning the bronze medal in Tokyo and running 22.09 in the 200 meters.
Jarryd and I go back 10 years or more. All of the stories and all of the most vulnerable moments really do come out in this podcast, which I wasn't certainly ready for. So hopefully you guys will be. And I think you will learn a lot. He has so much insight into everything from his experiences. I just really love this guy. So I hope that you guys do too. And I know Kacy does as well.
Keep a box of tissues close by.
That's probably a good idea. I am so excited today because we have a good friend of mine, an awesome runner and Olympian, Jarryd Wallace, on the show today with us. Jarryd, thanks for coming.
Heck yeah. Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
I was actually thinking about today, when did we first meet? How many years ago has it been?
10. Yeah.
Yep.
A decade. A decade. Many moons ago.
And I was thinking about all the different things that we've been through since then. You hadn't even done your first Olympic Games at that point.
Yeah. Literally, I was just getting ready for the Pan Am Games. I had lost my leg like less than a year since we started working together. It was like within less than a year from the amputation, which is crazy that it's been a decade that we've worked together, but it's also been over a decade from that. But yeah, no, I was thinking too about this time, and I'm like, all Kate's and I's conversations are like behind closed doors. Like, we're going to have to be careful what we talk about here today. Man, this is going to be fun. I'll tell you what, you guys are in for a treat here.
All right. I'll be the referee. Keep things honest here.
Perfect.
Well, I don't think we have to worry about honesty. It's about how much do we want to say out loud.
No doubt.
It is true. I mean, I wasn't even married. I went to go get married after you've been married. I went to your wedding and we both had kids. I mean,
life has happened, but we have stayed together through it all. And Kate has been a huge part of. You've been a huge part of keeping my body together and intact for my entire journey. So I'm 31 right now, and I'm committing to going to Paris, running 3 more years. And that's only possible because you've been keeping my body together. So big hot take there, a little news break. We're going 3 more years, and
oh my God.
So you're stuck with me for at least 3 more years to keep me together. But yeah, it's been so much fun. Obviously, we've developed a relationship far beyond just patient and PT. You're like a big sister to me, so it's super fun to just done life. Ultimately done life together.
Yeah, I know. I was just telling Kacy right before the show, I said, he's like my little brother, the kind that wants to torment me sometimes. Andy calls him Uncle Jarryd.
I was like, really? Jarryd, your little brother? Really?
Here we are. It's true.
Here we are. It is true. So, Kacy, why don't you go ahead? Because otherwise, Jarryd and I are going to shoot the, you know what?
We like to really start with how people got into running, what their running story is. And I think you have several parts to yours. We know you come from a family of athletes. So tell us how you got into running in the first place.
Yeah, I always joke with people and tell them I ran before I walked. Mom was a collegiate runner at the University of Georgia, ran professionally for a few years. Dad was a tennis player at Georgia, very active. They both ran marathons together early on. And so shortly after I was born, they began training for a marathon. And so I was just chilling in the baby jogger while they were doing mileage and getting ready for the marathon. So, it was just a part of my life, right? A part of my upbringing, probably like second grade when I realized that not every family woke up at 6 a.m. on Saturdays and went and ran road races and fun runs and 5Ks on the weekends. Like I was like, okay, we're strange. That's not a normal thing. But that was just like a part of our family. Like fitness was just a huge part of our upbringing. And it was kind of just a way that we did stuff together. So that was it for me, like all the way up until high school. Like I played tennis competitively from a young age. And so, running was just always a way for me to stay in shape, or, mom would come home from school and mom would go for runs. So I just go and join her, and like kind of quality time with mom. And so, that was always running for me. And it wasn't until high school where I, competed for the first time for a team and, really got to push myself and be around other athletes. And I think I kind of saw my potential as a track athlete at that point. And I think running for me at that stage is when it kind of shifted from just being this fun activity that I did on the weekends and with the family to, hey, maybe I could follow mom's footsteps and run in college and maybe beyond. And so, that was where the dream was birthed, if you will, towards, hopefully being an Olympian one day and definitely having the opportunity to compete, on the college level and be a part of the college team.
So tell us a little bit about when you got, from high school, college, and then how did you become a Paralympic athlete? And I mean, I know the story and I know it's out there in the world, but kind of give us your version for people who don't know you.
Yeah. So when I was 17, just after my junior year, I'd won 2 state titles in the 800 and the mile, started cross country season my senior year, had nagging injuries like through most of my high school career. So it was just stress fractures. And so I'd take 6-8 weeks off. They would go away. I'd train for 3 or 4 months. They'd come back. And that was just kind of my story, my whole entire sophomore, junior, going into senior year. I got frustrated because I was like, hey, colleges are looking at me. I'm obviously running fast enough to, compete in college athletics, like winning state titles, wanting to defend those. But I'm like injury prone. So is this realistic? Am I just going to be an injury prone athlete? Like, what's the deal? And so we went and got a couple other opinions from different doctors. And that was when we learned about compartment syndrome. And that was ultimately what I ended up having. I ended up having a chronic case. So it's called chronic exertional compartment syndrome. So where the pressure builds up in your calves, it cuts off nerve function and blood flow. It feels a lot like stress fractures. It's located very similar to that same area, but it's instead of it being structural, it's muscular, right? So the fascia was just, clamping down on the muscles. So in order to get rid of it, because it was chronic, when I took the time off, it went away. But then when I started putting mileage on, it came back. So there was a surgery, it was a 6-week elective surgery. And for me, it was kind of like, so you're telling me I can have the surgery 6 weeks later, I'll be running pain-free and I won't ever have to deal with this again. Sign your boy up. Like, let's go. And so that was like a dream. I was like, man, I've never trained for a whole year without being in pain. So this sounds great. So went in to have that procedure done after my cross country season, my senior year. And unfortunately just had complications in the surgery. After 3 days of recovery, went to PT the first morning to take the bandages off and begin my rehab, and leg was black and blue. They sent me back to the emergency room. Basically, they sent me back to the doctor, went to the emergency room. They opened me up and had lost 60% of muscle from my knee down. So had a pseudoaneurysm in the surgery, and suture came undone while I was recovering. And, it's just kind of a freak thing that happened. So I spent the next 2.5 years, I had a total of 10 reconstructive surgeries trying to save my leg. As you can imagine, during that season of life, it was a huge loss of identity. I think was like the biggest thing that I look back and like walk away, because I was a high school kid. High school kids don't have a ton yet they've got to worry about per se. But, the one thing that I identified with was being an athlete. All my friends knew me as the track guy, the fast dude, whatever, and, wanted to go to college. And that was where I was, was getting a college track scholarship, not a college, educational scholarship by any means. And so, it was like, as 17-year-olds, I'm like, well, what value do I have? What do I bring to the table? And so it was really just kind of a dark season, a lot of drinking, drugs, whole deal for, 18 months of kind of just like, why me, which is a totally realistic question, I feel like to ask in that situation. And at the same time, was just realizing that my life completely changed forever, and it wasn't just about not being able to run again. It got to the point where I was addicted to pain medication. I was constantly in pain. I couldn't feel parts of the bottom of my foot. Like I had a very deformed limb, and just a normal quality of life was not even on the table anymore. And so, going through that entire process, I learned a lot about myself and leaned into my faith to really help get me through that. And ultimately, once I got to the point where I stopped trying to kind of like control my circumstances and figure out how to solve the problem, and I realized that I just need to like surrender and let go and trust whatever the plan is for my life, that was when things kind of started to kind of come together, if you will. And I remember sitting in a doctor's office, and he basically looked at me and was like, dude, like, it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when you lose your leg. He said, you got an 8-year-old leg on a 20-year-old's body. And that was like, it wasn't the first time I heard about amputation, but it was the first time like it was brought into perspective, like pretty real, pretty straightforward. And I think that was the moment where I kind of realized, maybe I need to consider, doing this. He asked basically simply, was like, what would you do with your life if your leg wasn't, the way it was? Like if your leg was fine, like what would you want your life to look like? And, I was like, pain-free would be awesome. Start, I'd love to be able to run again. One day play with my kid in the yard, just kind of wanted to be normal. And, what we got down to at the end of it, he was like, man, it's just not realistic. You're not going to be able to do that with the leg that you got. But if you consider to have your leg amputated, like those things would be possible. And so from a really unique perspective, amputation became hope. Amputation became this thing that I wasn't really afraid of anymore. I realized that I was letting my like reality that I had a very deformed limb, I was letting that kind of drive the decisions versus saying, hey, like there's other options. Like, what do I want my life to look like? And then let's make decisions that are going to allow me to get closer to that. And for me, having my leg amputated was that decision to be able to be pain-free and to live a normal life. And what should have been probably the hardest decision a 20-year-old would ever have to make ended up being a really easy decision because it gave me that opportunity. And it was this moment of hope. And I'm grateful that I got to go through that 2.5 years of like frustration and anger and a lot of surgeries and pain, because I don't think that if it would have been amputation day one, or if I wouldn't have experienced that, I don't know if I would have like seen amputation as hope. I don't know if I would have seen amputation through the positive lens that I've been able to view it as. And I think that perspective has really been a huge part of why I recovered so quickly, and have been able to, positively and confidently move forward.
I mean, you and I have talked a lot about that and a lot about the lessons that we've both had to learn throughout the years because of the situations and the stories that are our lives. Yeah. What would you say to people that are going through a hard time, whether it's yours or not? How are they going to get to that first step, or what would you say to them?
I think that there's this like concept or perspective that we all subconsciously walk around with. And it's like this feeling that like everything has to be okay. And it's not okay to be not okay. And that's a bunch of hogwash, because sometimes life sucks. and
you're so Southern. Hogwash.
Hogwash. There's a bunch of hogwash right there. Oh man.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I couldn't help it.
But it is. I mean, it is literally one of the most like poisonous thoughts that we can ever have. And we're doing it because we're trying to protect ourselves and the people around us. But the reality is it's so doing the opposite. It's okay to be not okay. And it's okay to need to ask for help. And it's okay to be in a pain. And we all have our moments of adversity. I always say adversity is relative. For me, it was losing my leg. For you, it was your heart and losing running and that whole, part of you. Right. And for some people, it's mental health, or maybe it's the loss of a loved one, or there's so many things outside of our control that happen. And the healing begins when you're honest with yourself. And when you can say that I'm hurting and it's okay that I'm angry right now. And actually it's a beautiful thing that I feel this, because it means that I cared so much about something, and I'm willing to admit that and address it so I can begin the healing process of recovery. Because if we don't do that, then we're never going to let ourselves care about anything else again. And that is the most poisonous place that we can exist in. And I know that because I lived there for 2.5 years. and it's a dark place to be. And so, whatever that is, for you, or, whatever that moment of adversity is, or whatever that pain is, A, you're going to be okay. B, it's okay to be not okay. And C, don't ever be afraid to ask for help, because the people that are closest to you want to know where you're at, want to help walk you through that process, and feel and even hurt sometimes with you.
Once this comes out on Spotify, I'm going to save the time stamps of this to listen to it again, because that was really beautiful. How did you ask for help?
When I was trying to figure out all the answers on my own, and when I was, angry at my circumstances, angry at God, angry at just life in general. I didn't surround myself by the greatest people, and just got caught in a poisonous cycle for a while. And at the end of the day, I had to make some tough decisions. And at that point, it was like, I had to stop hanging around who I was hanging around with. I literally went from having a lot of friends to zero friends. And at some point you have to make radical decisions. At some point you have to, and this is maybe a bad way of saying it, but you have to get so mad at where you're at, and you have to stop complaining about it and start doing something about it. We find ourselves in so many places in life. And I say we collectively, because hopefully people who listen to this are nodding their head. The reality is it's so much easier to complain about something we don't like than actually do something to change it. Because doing something actually takes action. It actually takes energy and time and depth and spending mental energy around it. But at some point, you have to stop complaining about that situation or being frustrated at, and you have to say, I have to make a change. Because I'm the only one that can control that for me. I'm the only one that's going to control the change, that outcome. And if I wouldn't have made the choice in that moment to do that, I might still be doing the same thing a decade later. And it may look a little different, but my life wouldn't look the same now. And then you fast forward to the doctor's office. At some point, I got mad enough at the reality of my life, and I wasn't comfortable with it, that I was willing to make a radical choice. And I realized that my thought process in the moment was I was letting what was my reality dictate how I was dreaming and how I was looking ahead, versus looking ahead and letting that drive the decisions I was making. That's a lesson that I've learned now, and I've applied since then. I didn't know that at the time. At the time, I was just so frustrated with where I was at. I knew I had to make a choice, no matter how radical it was. So at some point you have to get to a place where you're willing to do something, to make a change, to get there. And I think that that's kind of has become the core of kind of a lot of the processes that I try to continue to take myself through, because these are all lessons that I've learned, and I try to say, okay, moving forward, how can I look back and say, okay, these are some principles that I've learned. How can I prevent me from going down these paths again? What can I take from these lessons, and how can I apply them moving forward in my life? So I'm grateful, at 17 years old, I got to experience something that most people maybe don't get to experience till way, way later in their life, because it brought me perspective. And it's been something that's continued to challenge me as I've, looked forward at, future goals, dreams, endeavors, et cetera.
So this reminds me of one concept or quote that I really love, and I think it has helped me conceptualize and get through similar things. But we change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. I've seen that played out so many times in my own life. And so it's cool to hear someone else say it.
Yeah, no, it's beautifully put.
And so how would you use all of this in your sport now? So you really have so much fuel and so much motivation and everything that you've gone through that, you've got to be the most mentally tough athlete out there.
Man, I'd like to think so. The reality is it's a daily choice, right? I know these things. We collectively, we again, read self-help books, listen to podcasts. We get all this knowledge and information, and then we wake up and first thing we do is complain about something. And the first thing we do is why am I doing this? Whatever. And it's 3:30 in the afternoon, and you're just like, wow, I completely wasted today. I forgot to make that choice when I woke up this morning that I was going to, attack the day in this way, or I was going to choose this perspective, or I was going to choose this lens. So there is no cookie cutter cheat code. It is, you have to make the choice every day. to do that and to bring that perspective. And yeah, I mean, I'm joking and saying like 3:30, look back and it's a waste today. It's not. Like, there's never a waste. Like, as soon as you realize that you're not there, make the decision to switch there. Like, there's never a moment and it's like, oh, I missed today, I'm just gonna cruise through the rest of the day and make it terrible, and then we'll start back tomorrow. But you know, it really is a daily choice. And I think that I look through like my career, right? So very shortly after I made the decision to have my leg amputated, I also made a goal of being on the world record list for Paralympic sport, to making the Paralympic Games and to becoming a world champion, all of which I've been able to accomplish, and all of which happened within the first 3 years of having my amputation and having a professional career, which was pretty amazing to be able to experience that. But even in that, you know, I've since then have, you know, pursued up until a couple of weeks ago, you know, hadn't won a Paralympic medal yet. You know, that was always a goal. And, you know, there were lessons that I learned along the way, and circumstances, again, sometimes outside your control. Sometimes it was just, you know, improper preparation, et cetera, that have, you know, continued to sharpen me into the athlete that I am today. So I think one of the things that I've learned, and heard from one of my mentors is one of the greatest skills you can have is to be a perpetual learner. And especially as a leader. And he was actually in a room of a bunch of fourth graders, and he asked them what happens when a leader stops learning. And the next day, one of the kids came back and said, well, we decided that that's when they become a dictator, because as soon as a leader stops learning, they feel like they know everything and they don't have anything else that they have to learn, which is just crazy profound from a fourth grader that was what they came up with. But it was such a reminder that, like, no matter how advanced you are, no matter how successful you are, no matter what you've learned, accomplished, et cetera, like, there's always more to learn. And even if it's not even like pure raw information, even if it's perspective, you know, even if it's like talking to someone who's maybe as advanced and smart as you are in your field, but hearing it from a different perspective and just being willing to listen is like so impactful. And so that's something that I, in very roundabout side tangent from your initial question, but, you know, I think that idea, the maybe cheat code to success, is just being a perpetual learner, being willing to consider other people's perspectives, being able to you know, learn from others, and always be in a position not to think that you're the most valuable, smartest person in the room, but always put yourself in a position to say, hey, I can always learn more. Because once you're there, it's going to be pretty amazing, the insights you gain and the things that you do actually learn.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I can't tell you how many times I learn from all of my team members at work. I mean, in every time we go back and every time we have conversations, asking the questions and trying to really understand where they are and what they're doing, and from patients. And so there's so many opportunities throughout the day to learn something and to apply it to what either you're doing in your profession or your life.
I think that's one of the reasons that you and I've worked together for so long, and why, one of the things I love most about you is you, I mean, your knowledge of the human body and how it works is mind blowing to me. And I've learned more than I ever thought I could about taking care of your body and how the body moves and flows. But even with that, like, every session you're like, hey, what do you feel? Well, what is it doing with this? And I'm like, well, what if we do this instead of that? Like, you're willing to consider, you know, whether we do it always or not is one thing, but you're willing to consider that perspective and my feel and my experience. And I think that that's such a huge, you know, place of humility. Ultimately, you know, it just shows like, hey, like, you know what, like, let's look at it through a different lens. I can get, you know, maybe pigeonholed down this track or funneled down this track. Let's take a step back and see if I'm missing something. And I think that that's such a beautiful part of why you and your entire team at Precision has that perspective. And it's why you guys are so successful, I believe.
Well, thanks, Jarryd, for that. I really appreciate it. And it's true. I mean, you know, we've talked about this before. You live in your body. I don't. So if what I'm not doing is not working, then there's always some other place to go, something else to explore or learn. So it really is about you as the athlete, because you're in it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, though.
Yeah.
So let's kind of venture on a little bit to the Olympics, and not the most recent Olympics.
Yeah.
So you are an Olympian 3 times over. We had London and we had Rio, and now we have Tokyo. So can you tell us a little bit about your first Olympic experience and then how that changed over time?
Yeah, totally. So, London was kind of just like a dream, unrealistic, like had my leg amputated at the end of like middle of 2010, got my first prosthetic to begin jogging on in October of 2010. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's realistic to make it to the games in 2012. Like, that's fine.
I remember. I was like, oh, okay, let's do it.
Yeah. Pretty much everybody's like, how do I encourage this kid, but also like maybe reel in his expectations a little bit, like, holy smokes. But it was one of those things that's just like, and me now, I've put my mind into it. It's like, okay, who's on board and who's not? Because if you're not on board, go somewhere else, because we're doing this thing and I'm only surrounding myself with people who are on board. Whatever it takes, this is what's happening. God bless your heart and everybody else's that dealt with my chaotic dreams in the early days. But thank you also for believing in me, because you were part of the Wallace team and were there with me in London, keeping me intact. And which is just to be there was absolutely an unbelievable experience. I was the very last person to make the team from trials. Lots of tears in the lobby of that announcement was just so crazy. And then, getting to go there and be there with the team that really allowed me to get there was amazing. So
in London was so great, being there and watching you and hanging out with the whole family. And Brian came and we just cheered in the middle of the night, and I treated you in my hotel room.
So true. Oh man. I'm laying on the floor and Brian's like, oh, you're just sticking some needles in his butt. All right, that's cool.
Oh my God,
like, Brian, we're doing our thing, man. All's well.
It was so funny. You're laying on the floor and I've got the towel over and I'm needling you, and he walks in and I was like, oh, and you're like, hey, Brian, what's up?
What's going on, man?
And I actually think you said, how do you feel about your fiance sticking needles in my butt?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think Brian was like, oh, it's no big deal. And walks away.
Other day, I was like, oh, you guys are totally going to make it. Perfect. Great answer.
Oh, but I remember just like first time walking into the stadium. I mean, I remember what it was like for me, and I was a spectator and, part of, we called it the Wallace team, but what was it like for you? It
was a surreal kind of humbling experience, right? You rewind 2 years and I'm sitting in a doctor's office with a jacked up leg and addicted to pain medication. And then fast forward 2 years and I'm standing on the start line of the 400 prelims with 80,000 people in the stands. And what just happened? My dream, long shot dream in high school is like, oh, maybe one day I'll get to run the Olympic trials, much less the Olympic finals. Kind of brought, like, for me, it's just like, all right, cool. Like, God, the story you have in my life is way better than the one I thought it was going to happen when I was 17. Like, this is next level, dude. But it was one of those things where it just like this bittersweet of like, I can't believe I'm here. But then it was also like this huge rush of, and it kind of happened in 2 phases. Like on the track, it's like, I'm running this race by myself, but there's an army of people behind me that enabled me to be on the start line. And what was so special is like right after the race, like I got to be with you guys, right? So like that team, like the core people who, believed in me, Ross and Rob and mom and dad and Steven Prosthetist, like you and Brian, like it was just so cool to have been able to like share that with everybody and to experience that. So that was kind of the first games where I was just like a shock that almost even made it. But then B, just like a reminder of ultimately how blessed I was to have the team and the support system to help, get me there. And then you kind of fast forward, I guess, 3 or 4 years to Rio. And by that time I'd, become a world champion and had broken the world record 4 times. And, it had really kind of launched my career. I was far and away the favorite going into Rio. I'd run 11 races under 11 seconds in the 100 meters. So 11 10-second 100-meter races, which has never happened in the history of Paralympic sports, still hasn't. It was just the most consistent year. no one was even close, to me ultimately, 2-3 tenths of a second off, which is a long ways in 100 meters. And get down to Rio. Unfortunately, I didn't bring anybody with me. I don't know if you guys remember the whole Zika thing that was going on during that time. So family didn't come, fiance didn't come, no really medical team. Obviously you, Brian, weren't able to make it. So yeah, there's just one of those weird kind of what I imagined or dreamed that games to be, started off like kind of polar opposite from just like a team standpoint. And then I get down there and unfortunately I got a respiratory infection. I just not able to perform at my best. I ended up getting sixth in the 100, barely lost my first race of the year in the prelims to a guy that had no business losing to, and ran my 2 slowest races ever, in the year, literally a half a second off of what I'd been pretty much consistently running. And so, yeah, it was one of those like kind of sobering experiences where I went down and was like far and away the favorite and left like completely empty handed, brokenhearted. Kind of questioned like if I was going to continue running, like was really contemplating, just laying the blade down and just moving on. There was a lot of kind of healing that had to kind of take place. And I think the biggest lesson that I learned from that is I had put so much energy and purpose and passion and identity in that performance. And I almost got back to the place where I was when I was in high school, right? Where it was like, it was this or nothing, which goes back to what I said earlier, where it's a daily choice, right? Because I'd learned that lesson. I'd learned the negative impact of putting your identity in something that's so fleeting and that you have no, that's not constant. And yet, you find myself there again. And it was just, it was a good reminder, and it was a good kind of reset to say, hey, like, you know what, like, running's got to be more about one race. Running's got to be way more about, at that point, I didn't know, right? It has to be about something more than just, winning a medal or having a record. And that was kind of when, came back from Rio, I got married, went to school, started looking at like, what do I want my life beyond running to look like? What impact or influence do I want to have in this community? And I started realizing that like at some point you need to, your why needs to be more than your what. So why you do what you do has to be more important than what you do. As you put all of your eggs into what you do, eventually something's going to change, or, job's going to switch, or, race isn't going to be won, whatever. And if you don't have your core into your why, your purpose, and let that fuel and drive the things that you do, you're going to continually find yourself in a place of hopelessness, of lost identity, of brokenness. And so for me, like I've kind of realized that my why was broken down into 3 things: of faith, family, and like a legacy, leaving, something behind, using the experiences I've got to create opportunities maybe for the next generation, if you will, in the adaptive community for me. So that's been kind of my focus over the last 5 years going into Tokyo, was just like, how can I ensure that during this entire process, my why maintains and has so much more value than what I do. And that goes back to identity. When I realized that my identity is who I am in Christ, the man I am as a leader in my family, and how I look at my position to influence the community and people around me, that changes the game. Take that perspective, implement that into everything that I do and I'm passionate about, changes how you show up on the track to practice, changes how you show up to races, changes how you interact with people, changes the conversations you have, changes the dreams you have, changes the passions and pursuits that you want to go down. And so I think that has been the most valuable comeback point or decision or choice that I kind of lean into every morning, because it really does lay the foundation and sets the tone for the day, the week, the month, the decisions, the direction.
And so what was it that made you decide to actually ultimately run Tokyo? Because if you had figured out your why and you were happy with what you were doing and you were really passionate about it. I mean, I remember when you came to me and said, "Hey, we're doing Tokyo." And I was like, okay. But like, what was that moment?
I think it was 2-part. I think that one was personal and had nothing to do with my why, had everything to do with a goal that I still hadn't achieved, right? So winning a Paralympic medal, like that was the only goal that I hadn't achieved, that I'd set. And so part of me was just like mad at it, and I wanted to freaking do it. I didn't want to sit around and complain about it. I just wanted to make that junk happen. Right. So
I love that answer. So true.
It was just honest. I mean, that's part of it. To negate that that's not part of it with me just being like lying to you guys and trying to sound cool. But the other part was realizing that the legacy aspect of my why is 100% a part of what I do as an athlete, as a runner, as a innovator in the space of this technology that we're using. So I think that also really helped drive that decision to realize that, in order to leave a legacy in this space, I need to stay in this space a little longer. We're not done yet. And even to fast forward, a little bit further, that's even why we're, kind of leaning into Paris, is that piece of the puzzle is it's formulating and it's close and it's coming together, but we're not there yet. And it's not time to step away yet. And what's fun for me is like, I've accomplished all my goals now. So I'm like, I'm resetting new goals, and I'm like, what new things can I go after? Also, like, I don't have any pressure. I've done it all. We're good. Like I'm just out here having fun. Just the whole guy living a dream,
Oh, no, this isn't good. This isn't good at all.
Yeah, I know. All of my competitors should be very scared. This is the last place that anybody wants me to be in, because it's just like, let's go. Let's do it.
I love it.
Little victory lap.
Come on.
So you decide on doing Tokyo. Looking at the Olympics, it's a 4-year cycle. It's a long time. Spend 4 years working towards this goal, and then 2020 happens. They start talking about canceling the Olympics, postponing them. You're in fantastic shape at the beginning of 2020, really gunning towards this goal. And ultimately, the Olympics get postponed.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how you healed from that experience, because I have to imagine that was really tough as well.
Yeah, totally. There was a massive identity issue again. And as I got closer and closer to Tokyo, and as I had sponsors, and as I had more responsibilities and more pressure and more expectations and all these things, I get kind of back into this like, oh, well, I am Jarryd the runner, and people are expecting me to do these things. And I start kind of putting all these stake into performance, right? And so one of the greatest things that ever happened for me was 2020 postponement, because I would have imploded in Tokyo or before if it would have happened on timeline, because I was spiraling downhill really, really quick. And I had no idea. I was on autopilot. We were moving, and the freight train was moving. We were going downhill. There's no stopping it. We're going until we're crashing. And hopefully it'll happen after the games, but it didn't look like it, knowing what I knew now. It was a scary reality, but because COVID happened, it gave me the time and the space to realize that I had completely vice gripped this whole thing again, and was not in the place again. Like you sit back and you listen to the past 20 minutes. I'm telling you all these tips and directions and goals and how to, accomplish all these things. And man, it's all pretty good lessons, right? To apply. But if you don't apply them, it doesn't work. Knowledge without application is nothing. And so thankfully I had the time to go through a season of like crazy panic attacks, overwhelming anxiety and stress, and like my body like straight up revolting against me. Like there were some days where I came in from PT and it was just like, we're just going to sit here and we just got to get me to breathe like normally. Cause I was just like hyperventilating, short breath, like just about to fall apart. And so I'm super grateful, again, like that obviously Kate and I've got such a great relationship, and we were able to like go to that space together. And she was such a champion fighting for me in that corner and during that time, because I needed that. But it was also like super, super scary in the sense that, I kind of look back and I was like, what if this postponement didn't happen? I kind of brought into perspective of there's a really large high suicide rate when it comes to like high performance athletes around like big events. Right. And this year, a couple friends took their lives in the sport, and it's so devastating. It's so heartbreaking to hear those stories and to know those people and to see that reality. But like without the postponement, I might have been heading in that direction. I was not in a good spot. I had no clue. And I had gotten so good at being me that no one around me would have had any idea either. That's the scariest part. As athletes, like, we become the people that everybody expects us to be. And we get so good at that we just go on autopilot, and we don't have necessarily a safe space to like be real and go to like let people know we're not okay. And it's real and it's scary. And I totally understand, hate it, but like understand why people can get to that point. And so I'm super, super grateful again, like the postponement happened because I got to have the time to realize that I was in a pretty bad space and got to stay there for as long as I needed to be, work through it without the pressure and expectation of performance being there, because it wasn't. Thankfully, we had that time. And it took me about 4 or 5 months to like really heal mentally. And then it took me about another 8 or 9 months to physically, like, to get my body chemically back. Like I had such a mad chemical imbalance in my body for fighting and being in that state for so long. And I just thought it was normal. It was just normal for me. And it took that break to realize it wasn't normal. And then it took me again, like almost like it was like 6 weeks before Tokyo, before I like started physically feeling kind of normal as well, as well as mentally. How did I handle going all the way back to your question? How did I handle the postponement? It was the hardest year of my life. But I'm also like so grateful that time and space was created because it totally saved my life.
I think it did too, Jarryd. I mean, I have never been more terrified with a patient than every time you came in. It was really scary. You were not in a good place.
Yeah. It was scary and it was real. And I mean, I think that's what's important to, kind of talk about and know and be aware of, because I'm so fortunate because I had places to go to. I had people that were checking up on me. I wasn't fighting. As soon as I realized what was going on, I like all my close people like knew like right away. Cause I was like, okay, like I know well enough now from my past, like, you surround myself like good people now and like bring this to light. Cause otherwise it's not going to end well. So, but again, I'm just grateful that I had the time and space to do that. Cause I don't want to know what potentially could have happened without that time or space.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it's definitely a blessing in disguise. And it couldn't have come at a better time.
And I'm so grateful because like even go back to 2016 when I was like a lock, right? A lock for gold in the 100 was like, it was like that medal. I want that medal. And it's about this race. And I've never viewed a medal or even considered viewing a medal more than just a trophy or an award for a performance at an individual race. But as soon as I picked this medal up and put it around my neck and got to my room in the village that night and just kind of like absorbed everything, it was like, this medal is not a representation of this race. This medal is a representation of the journey. And that, for me makes it that much more special. The memories and experiences that I've had leading into it mean way more than just one race and one performance.
Well, that's the warm and inspiring note that I think we should start to wrap up with. What do you think, Kate?
I think so too. Yeah. And you better go because I've been in tears for a little while back here.
Oh, I have been too. I've been blinking them back a little bit. So you're not the only one. I think we all connect with this on some level. And I think our listeners will too. And I think that's really important to talk about these things and until you zoom out into this big journey, a lot of times it can be really hard to understand truly what it means to go through things like this. So anyway, so we like to end our podcast with final 3 questions. Jarryd, are you up to the task?
We'll see.
This is much easier than my last question.
Okay.
Like 1,000 times easier. What is the one thing or maybe a few things that you do to regularly take care of yourself?
Way different now than a year ago. That's for sure. Daily meditation in some way, shape or form. I have the Calm app. I don't like properly meditate. It's pretty tough to get to a quiet space in the house with a 2-year-old running around all the time. So I actually meditate on my way to practice every day. I keep my eyes open, obviously, because I'm driving. It's like a 20-minute drive, and I do there's 2 daily 10-minute sessions, and I do both of them just on the way to practice. And it's so good because I just get breathing. It recenters me and refocuses me. And it's a lot more of just like a breathing mental activity for me than like just trying to get quiet fully. The car is the most quiet place for me right now. So I'd say that is kind of at the top of the list. And then I also have been doing this breathing training. So pretty much everything that I do now has a lot to do with just breath. And it's amazing. It's amazing the impact that breath has on your mental state, your ability to control your body and get it to relax and it work more efficiently. So that's something I've learned a lot about the past year and have become a better athlete and better person because of it.
I couldn't be more proud right now. That's my dream for everybody right there.
It was touch and go in the beginning. I was fighting the.
You were fighting me hardcore on this in the beginning.
How am I going to trust somebody who's, I don't even know, to get into this like calm place? And I say that jokingly, but if anybody's like tried meditation and done it like on a phone, like it is weird sometimes. Like you don't know the person and they're like trying to get you to challenge like your innermost being, and it can kind of feel a little vulnerable. But just remember that it's a one-way deal. Like they're not there actually having the conversation with you. They're taking you through a personal experience for you. So once that kind of clicked in my head, I realized it was just kind of me and me. Then we're good to go.
I'm glad you said that out loud, but I'm still more proud of you now than I've ever been in my whole life. And it's not the medal, it's the breathing.
Perfect. As it should be.
Right. Okay. So that leads us to our second question, which is, what is bringing you joy right now?
My Levi, for sure. My 2-year-old little man. He is the funniest, coolest little dude. He has the craziest sense of humor. He like understands sarcasm. He's so smart. And I'm like, he totally got his brain from his mama. My goodness. But he's just so much fun. And he really, and even kind of took some experiences from him to Tokyo. He gets, and you asked the question, joy, like he gets so excited about like an orange, like an orange. Like, I'm like, hey dude, do you want an orange? He's like, ooh, orange. And I'm just like, everybody needs to be more like this kid. Like if we can just like 50% of that energy level and just excitement and just joy about the simplest things in life, our world would be such a better place. It's so amazing, the joy of little kids. And it's just something I'm like, okay, I let the smallest things ruin my day. And he lets the smallest things bring him so much joy. What's wrong with this picture? I'm supposed to be leading and teaching him, and he is leading and teaching me.
He is so incredible, and he is so adorable. And you're right, just smart and fun.
It's awesome. We love him.
Babies and dogs, man, they've got this life figured out.
Yo, so good. Verdict's still out on cats, though.
I'm with you on that. I'm sorry if we have any cat listeners.
Yeah, we got three dog people here. So yeah, I think we could all take lessons from dogs and babies about joy. But our final question, Jarryd, is what is the one thing that you love so much that you just have to do, eat, be a part of? What needs to be in your life?
I would say golf. I learned so much from the game of golf every time I played. It's the most horrific sport and amazing sport all at the same time. It was the only sport I could play when I was going through all of my surgeries and stuff, because I could stand and I could swing a golf club. And so it was like the one thing that kind of kept me in sport and kept me like, I don't know, just like competing in some way, shape, or form. And then since having my amputation, there's so many applications to a round of golf and a 100-meter race that I get to practice. Like, so in my 100-meter race, I take between 48 and 50 steps, 10 to 11 seconds, just depending on how well I execute the race. I've got so many checkdowns. Very rarely, if ever, is there a perfect 100-meter race. It's rather perfectly managing the imperfections of the race itself. A lot of things go wrong in the 100. It's just how do I manage those things to help me run as efficiently and effectively as possible. And it's very similar to a game of golf. A lot of shots don't end up where you were hoping they were, but it's less worrying about that shot and how are you going to manage that next shot? What are you going to do next? So it's a lot of life lesson stuff too. Like you can't control that situation that you find yourself in. You can only choose how you manage to handle that in itself. So I love the game of golf because I get to practice that in a very slowed down, elongated format. And I get to practice that principle over and over and over again, hoping that when I get to a 10-second race, then I can have that process practice pretty efficiently in other areas to hopefully have it bleed over. So golf has a special place in my heart right now. And Levi happens to love it a lot too, which I'm super excited about. So
Oh, that's awesome. That was our last question officially, Jarryd. I feel like we might have to have a part 2 at some point because there are so many things that I know about you that I feel like the world should know. And then also some of the things that are coming up in your life.
Should they?
Okay, maybe they shouldn't.
Should
but...
they know?
So maybe someday we will do a part 2 and talk about what you are doing now and kind of what the next few years looks like, because I just think you're an incredible human and you've had such a great impact on the world, and you continue to do that and will continue to do that. And so
appreciate it. Well, I love you a ton.
I love you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that it resonated with you and that you learned something. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps increase our visibility within the platform so that more awesome people like you can find us.
If you'd like to support us further, pretty please, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/morethanmiles. That's www.patreon.com/morethanmiles. Or for a few dollars, you can help the show grow and keep going, as well as receive exclusive perks like monthly Q&As with us. Until next time, remember to run the mile you're in, and that training is so much more than miles.